Hello to everyone. I'm Dina from Faculty of Organization and Informatics Varaždin, University of Zagreb, and I'm glad that as part of the 41st International Business Information Management Association Conference, I can present the paper The Theory-Practice Gap in Capital Budgeting, Empirical Study from Croatia, prepared in co-authorship with my colleague Dunja VISNJIC. This is the agenda of the presentation that I will present in the next 15 minutes. In today's business environment, marked by uncertainty, making optimal or relaxed, adequate decision on capital budgeting is crucial for the survival and success of the company. With the intention of evaluating investment projects, companies have at their disposal a number of methods of capital budgeting and risk evaluation. Depending on their characteristics, some of these capital budgeting methods are theoretically superior, like discounted cash flow methods, discounted payback period, net present value, internal rate of return, profitability index, annuity method, and others are theoretically inferior, non-discounted cash flow methods, and other methods like payback period, accounting rate of return, return on investment. The investment designer has also various risk assessment methods at his disposal, from simpler ones that include the determination of discount rates to sophisticated ones that include, among others, sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, simulation, and decision tree analysis. The attention of researchers in the field of business finance, among other conventional areas, is occupied by the application of different capital budgeting and risk assessment methods in practice, and to a lesser extent to the explicit identification of their compliance with theoretical views and suggestions. Accordingly, the general goal of this paper is to detect the non-existence or existence of the theory-practice gap of capital budgeting of medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia. Namely, although many authors have so far observed the theory and practices of capital budgeting, the gap between the latter is still insufficiently explored, especially in the Republic of Croatia. However, although theoretical models, both theoretically inferior or simpler and superior or sophisticated, applicable regardless of geographical area, activity, and factors at a company level, the actual capital budgeting and risk assessment practices vary to some extent and are more or less consistent with theoretical suggestions. Based on the review of previous surveys, it was concluded that the gap between theory and practice is more present in the field of application of capital budgeting methods than in the field of assessment and application of risk evaluation methods. The gap between academic theory and business practice is also more pronounced in developing countries. In most developing countries, but also in some developed countries, non-DCF and other methods, especially payback period, are more popular than theoretically superior DCF methods, especially net present value and internal rate of return. The gap in developed countries is generally manifested in incomplete integration and prevalence of DCF methods, especially net present value and internal rate of return in practice, and in the still significant use of the simpler non-DCF payback method. In the context of using risk incorporation and evaluation methods, the findings of the selected studies show that in both developed and developing countries, more sophisticated and theoretically suggested methods for risk assessment, sensitivity analysis, scenario and simulation analysis methods are primarily used. Although significantly less expressed and homogeneous in terms of country development, the gap between the theory and practice of risk assessment methods is manifested in although large, still incomplete adoption of theoretically superior methods in practice and additional recourse to inferior methods. In general, regardless of the development of countries, net present value, internal rate of return, and payback period on the one hand, and the sensitivity analysis, scenario and simulation analysis on the other stand out as the three most used, most popular methods of capital budgeting and risk evaluation methods in selected previous surveys. Based on the literature review and the defined general goal of the paper, a scientific research task was determined, which consisted in testing the following basic and related auxiliary hypotheses. Basic hypothesis: the gap between the theory and practice of capital budgeting of medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia is in line with the one identified for the developed countries of Central Europe. First auxiliary hypothesis, the use of capital budgeting methods in the valuation of investment projects has not been fully adopted in the practice of medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia. Second, medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia use DCF methods more often than non-DCF methods and other methods. The percentage of medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia that always or almost always or overall use the non-DCF payback period method when evaluating investment project is higher than 60% and 80% respectively, is stated by third hypothesis. Fourth hypothesis, the most important methods of capital budgeting when evaluating investment projects in medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia are net present value, internal rate of return, and payback period. And the fifth, medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia equally often use and prefer the net present value method over the internal rate of return. Sixth auxiliary hypothesis states there is no statistically significant difference in the frequency of application of certain methods of capital budgeting between medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia. Seventh auxiliary hypothesis, the use of risk evaluation methods in the evaluation of investment projects is not fully adopted in the practice of medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia. 8.1. Medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia more often use more sophisticated methods like sensitivity analysis, scenario and simulation analysis method than less sophisticated methods, decision tree analysis method of raising the required rate of return, short and payback method, and other methods of investment project risk evaluation. Ninth auxiliary hypothesis states the most important methods of risk evaluation of investment project in medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia are sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, and simulations. And the 10th one, there is no statistically significant difference in the frequency of application of certain methods of risk evaluation of investment projects between medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia. For the purpose of testing the said basic and auxiliary hypothesis of the paper, empirical research was conducted on the non-existence or existence of theory-practice gap of capital budgeting in the Republic of Croatia. The research population consisted of all medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia registered in the databases of the financial agency, specifically a total of 2,030, of which 15% medium-sized companies and 19.85% large companies. Data collection was performed by survey method using a survey questionnaire as the main research instrument. The survey consisted of 13 questions that were divided into three parts, referring to demographic characteristics, capital budgeting methods, and investment project risk evaluation methods. The questionnaire was sent in the form of circle letters to the email addresses of the entire population. It was open for acceptance of responses in the period from July 22nd to August 19, 2020, and in that period a total of 104 responses was collected. The collected sample of 104 responses constitutes a sample of voluntary responses, not a random sample, and indicates a response rate of 5.12%. Process and describe the results and to test the said hypothesis, descriptive statistic methods and inferential statistic methods were used, specifically the chi-square test and Fisher exact test to test the independence of traits and Kramer's V-measure of the relationship between the two nominal variables. The results were processed using MS Excel and Stata 40 software packages. The structure of the sample by size of company is shown in Figure 1. By company size, the sample consists of around 28% of large companies and around 72% of medium-sized companies. Figure 2 shows the structure of the sample according to the representative or predominant area of activity in which the company is engaged. The structure of activities by number of companies is dominated by the manufacturing industry, which is represented by 5% of companies, followed by trade with around 19% of companies in the sample. Figure 3 shows the structure of the sample according to the age of the respondents. Most respondents are between the ages of 40 and 49, 43.3% of them. Figure 4 shows the structure of the sample according to the work experience of the respondents at the current workplace. Most respondents, more than a half, exactly 54.8%, have more than 9 years of work experience in the current workplace. Out of the total number of respondents, approximately 93% stated that they work in appropriate positions. Figure 5 shows the structure of the sample according to the level of education of the respondents. It is evident that the most of the respondents are with higher education. The majority of respondents, 63.5% of them, have completed a university or specialist professional graduate study. As shown on the figure 6, the use of capital budgeting methods is not fully adopted in the practice of these companies according to the first auxiliary hypothesis. However, although as many as 34% of companies in the first question stated that they do not use capital budgeting methods, some of them later stated that they still use capital budgeting methods to some extent. In agreement with the second auxiliary hypothesis, average frequency of using theoretically superior DCF methods is 80.5% and is higher than the average frequency of using non-DCF methods and other methods, which is 75.3%, as shown on figure 7. The frequency of using the non-DCF method payback period is, according to the third auxiliary hypothesis, higher than 60% and higher than 80% respectively, and the frequency of use of DCF methods discounted payback period and profitability index. Moreover, the payback method is the most used capital budgeting method along with net present value and internal rate of return. The frequent use of the payback method is closely related to its simplicity and liquidity requirements. Moreover, the poorly developed financial markets in Croatia discourages more frequent use of discounted cash flow techniques. In addition, companies, in line with fourth auxiliary hypothesis, chose combinations of these three methods as the most important. In accordance with the latest results about the frequency of using the net present value and internal rate of return methods, the answers to the explicit question related to favoring one of the mentioned methods indicate a slight preference of the internal rate of return method over the net present value method. Almost equal importance given in practice to these methods is consistent with theory recommendations for simultaneous use of both and enables widely acceptation of fifth auxiliary hypothesis. Further, the results in accordance with auxiliary hypothesis number 7 indicate that the use of risk evaluation methods, although more adopted in comparison with the application of capital budgeting methods, is not fully adopted in the companies concerned, as is shown on figure 10. However, on average, companies more often use more sophisticated than unsophisticated methods, which is in line with 8 auxiliary hypothesis. At the same time, companies are highlighting the first ones, namely sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, and simulation analysis, as the most important methods of risk evaluation of investment projects, which allows the acceptance of the ninth auxiliary hypothesis. The test results of 6th and 10th hypotheses pointed out that there is no statistically significant difference in the frequency of application of certain methods of capital budgeting or risk evaluation between medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia. Finally, taking into account the full or partial acceptance of all auxiliary hypotheses, a conclusion is made on accepting the basic hypothesis of the research that the theory-practice gap of capital budgeting of medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia is in line with the gap established on the basis of reviews of previous surveys, specifically those identified for Central and Eastern European countries. This indicates still, in relation to the desired knowledge, insufficient knowledge and application of the methods in practice, which implies the need for education of company managers in the field of capital budgeting. The scientific contribution of the paper is manifested in the theoretical and practical sense. The theoretical scientific contribution is reflected in the critical analysis and systematized review of relevant existing scientific knowledge in the field of capital budgeting and in new scientifically relevant knowledge about the existence of the gap between the theory and practice of capital budgeting of medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia. The scientific contribution is also contributed by the fact that this study is only the second study in the Republic of Croatia that analyzes the capital budgeting practice of Croatian companies and the only one recently. The research is aimed at the entire population of medium-sized and large companies in the Republic of Croatia, which in terms of spatial scope is in the range of renewed previous studies. In addition to the above, this research practically contributes to reducing the gap between the theory and practice of capital budgeting. From this aspect, the utility of research findings for companies is reflected in considering their current practices in the light of knowledge of those adopted by other companies. Respecting the scientific contribution of the paper, certain limitations should be noted. These are primarily manifested in the small sample size, the unspecified job position of the person to whom the questionnaire is addressed, in the survey questionnaire that was not previously tested, the impossibility of spatial and temporal generalization of identified results and implication, and the fact that research focuses on an empirical review of investment project valuation methods rather than the entire capital budgeting process or other phases of the process, which are often more critical for the success of the company. Accordingly, it is recommended to focus the extension of this research on the amortization of identified limitation. Additionally, the empirical part of this paper could be a stimulus for future research of the capital budgeting determinants as well as the impact of capital budgeting practices on the company performance, which could ultimately contribute to the development of the problem area as a whole. Thank you for your attention.